good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever it is, wherever you are. I guess I'm your U.S. history teacher. I'm Zach Godfrey. Today's topic, Compromise of 1850. Before we get started, as always, if you have access to your online textbook, I call the Jefferson text. It's published by McGraw-Hill. Go ahead and click onto that. Chapter 16, Toward Civil War. Lesson 1, Search for Compromise. And that'll be the section that primarily parallels the lecture you're going to witness today. Today, again, Compromise of 1850. I'm very excited to talk to you about this story. I love teaching history. I love talking to you guys about history. I think it's so important to learn where human beings came from and analyze how the story of humans led us to where we are and where we're going to be. And sometimes when you teach history, the stories are both very compelling and also very important in regards to who human beings are, who and what is the United States of America. And I feel like the Compromise of 1850 is one of those just awesome examples of compelling story, super important story to tell us who we are and why we are, all coming into one. You know how we do this? I'm going to break it down into topics for you. When you're taking notes, write the topics on the left side of your notes. Go ahead and summarize, explain, describe, etc., all the things that come out of my mouth and that you read on the side here while I'm giving you this lecture. And then there will be an online assignment that accompanies this lecture. Here we go. Topic number 1. I'm going to call this topic Free Soil Party, the Free Soil Party. We've been talking about manifest destiny for a while, the growth, the expansion, east to west. We specifically focused on the Mexican-American War. Oh boy, is America going to accumulate a lot of territory from the Mexican-American War, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and then eventually the Gadsden Purchase. There will be a lot of debate in Congress after the Mexican-American War, because the debate is going to be like, well, we got all this new land, but not everybody agrees on what can happen on that land. I think you know what they don't agree on. Can the land acquired in the Mexican-American War, when they apply, the people of the land apply for annexation, apply for statehood, can they legally practice slavery or not? That is a huge debate following the acquisition of land after the Mexican-American War. One of the guys that we'll talk about very briefly, John C. Calhoun, South Carolina, Warhawk. It's crazy. He's been super influential all the way back from like the 1810 period prior to the War of 1812. Here we are approaching 1850. We're still talking John C. Calhoun. We're still talking these Warhawks that are influential to America in the 1800s. John C. Calhoun, one of the things he proposes is he says, listen, moving forward, the people of the territory, they should vote. They should choose whether or not they're going to be free or slave, regardless of the Missouri Compromise. Some people are going to like, okay, some people aren't. It's not going to really solve the debate at all. The debate will rage on. There will be a presidential election in 1848. Remember, James K. Polk, he said he was going to be a one-termer. Well, he did. He followed through with his word, one-termer. He ran on that Manifest Destiny platform. He accomplished his goals. He's out. So who do we have? We've got the Whig Party, obviously. The Democrat Party has been the most dominant party. But they're a little bit in chaos, I guess, after Polk left. What's going to happen is the Whigs, they want to win, and they're going to go to an American hero, and they're going to approach General Zachary Taylor, great name. He was one of the heroes of the Mexican-American War. He's not really like a classic Whig. He's also not necessarily like a classic Democrat. He's what we call like a moderate, a down-the-middle kind of guy politically. And he's a war hero. And so the Whigs approach him. They say, hey, buddy, will you run to represent our party in the election of 1848? He agrees. He's going to run against a Democrat. That's the other main party. Now, Martin Van Buren, if you remember him, he was Jackson's VP in Jackson's second term. He was the president that dealt with, not so well, the Panic of 1837, kind of that was a result of Andrew Jackson taking on the bank. He wants to represent the Democrats. He does not win the Democratic nomination. They go with another guy that's kind of more like Jackson. And he attaches to this growing movement, this growing abolitionist movement, and they're tired of slavery, and they're called the Free Soil Party. They want to make sure that people in the territories that are acquired from Mexico, that when they get statehood, that they're free soil. They will choose Martin Van Buren, so it's going to be like a three-party presidential election. But Zachary Taylor wins. The Whigs win. Why do I go into such detail about the Free Soil Party? It's just it's an interesting observation in the growing change in attitudes of slavery in America. And I think it's also interesting that Martin Van Buren, former Democrat, is now leading this Free Soil Party. Again, though, General Zachary Taylor, he wins the election of 1848 for the Whig Party. He was a Mexican-American war hero. And that's topic one, Free Soil Party, in this debate amongst Congress. What do we do with the land that we acquired from Mexico after the war in regards to the issue of slavery? That's topic number one. Topic number two, I'm just going to call it tensions. Ooh, tensions. People are really starting to get upset with each other. Part of the thing that we acquired from the Mexican-American War was this big old piece of land called California, and if you watched another video, they got gold there. And so California is going to be to represent the tensions between the North and the South. If California is added as a free state, which it eventually will be, that would make sure that the amount of free states in the U.S. outnumbers the amount of slave states. And who is that going to make mad? That's going to make the southern region very, very mad. There's also growing, we talked about the shift in attitudes towards slavery, more people willingly and openly and becoming enlightened to the concept that slavery is a bad practice. They say, hey, we're Washington, D.C., we're the capital of the United States of America. This whole country was like created on the concept of freedom and liberty, I think. Well, in our capital, we probably shouldn't have slaves then. And so there's a lot of people that are like, hey, we need to at least ban slavery in Washington, D.C. So the South is like really mad. They feel like America's like turning on them, and they feel like isolated and alone from the rest of America now, specifically on the issue of slavery. One of the things they propose in a response to demonstrate how upset they are and that the rest of America is turning their back on them is they have individuals propose these things called fugitive slave laws, which is basically like if a slave runs away to a free area and gets caught, the slave will be sent back to its owner, and in addition, any American citizen that like helps the slave, flee and get freedom or whatever would also be charged of a crime. And that's just to show like, hey, don't touch our slaves and don't make rules and laws that tell us what to do. This is our state. Remember, this kind of like goes all the way back to the difference in the concept of a confederal system of government and a federal system of government. And right now the South feels like they're more into states' rights because their states want to have the right to have slavery. There's even rumors that Southern leaders are discussing seceding or separating from the Union if California is added as a free state. So that's topic two. That's what I like to call tensions. The North and the South, they're mad. They're real mad. What are they mad about? They're mad about the issue of slavery and whether or not the land acquired from the Mexican-American territory can be free states or slave states. That's topic two. Tensions. Here's topic three. Topic three I call Clay's plan. And here we go again. We talked about John C. Calhoun. It's like, can we ever have an election where his name doesn't come up? We got the same thing with Henry Clay, Silver-Tongued Fox. Golly, all the way since the War of 1812. There's a dog right there. I don't know if you can see it. Since the War of 1812, we could not have a lecture without Henry Clay coming up in some way, shape, or form. So here we go. Clay's plan. Henry Clay, he's from Kentucky. He proposes the following things. He wants to keep the Union intact. He doesn't want the North and the South to separate. He wants everybody to get along. These are some of the things he proposes. He says, obviously, we're talking about California and its annexation, so they want to be free. California, that is. California should be free. That's part number one. Part number two, any other new territory, when they apply for annexation, the people of the territory can choose whether or not they want to be a free state or a slave state. And there will not be any federal laws to determine if these states can choose to be slave states or not, like no laws. If they want to be slave states, they should be able to be it. If they want to be free states, they should be able to do it. He does give the abolitionists something they want. He says, we will ban slavery in the capital, Washington, D.C. He does give the abolitionists another thing. He says the slave trade itself, so like stealing African people from Africa and importing them into America, taking their freedom and turning them into slaves and essentially starting to sell them like cattle and stuff, that practice would be banned. However, the practice of slavery would still exist. So if somebody was already a slave in America, they could continue, and essentially I think their offspring would probably still be captured in that system of slavery, but you couldn't bring new slaves over from the Africas. That's actually going to really hurt slaves in the Americas, because it's going to make their value go up and make owners, way more cautious and cognizant as to what's going on with their slaves, because their value is so much higher. So then what do they do to make sure they can not lose their slaves after the banning of slavery? The last thing Clay proposes is he proposes a fugitive slave law that's been so highly debated in Congress for a while now. It's going to spark great debate in Congress. People are like, oh, no, I like it, I don't like it. It's North is mad, the South is mad, everybody's mad. Just to give you an idea of people's feelings, John Calhoun did not like the plan. Daniel Webster, who we have talked about before, Daniel Webster, I kind of like to say he represents the concept of federal supremacy. When we talked about Daniel Webster before, Daniel Webster was very anti-Jackson. He tried to get Jackson to lose, I believe, the election of 1832 by proposing the extension of the bank charter before the charter expired, which led to Jackson attacking the bank, which led to the Panic of 1837. Long story short, Daniel Webster, federal supremacist, he agrees with Clay's plan. But most importantly, who sits at the top, and I shouldn't say throne because that's very anti-American, but who's the leader of our federal government at this time? It is the President, General Zachary Taylor. And what's the president's feeling on Clay's plan to settle tensions between the North and the South? Is he disagrees with Clay's plan. Zachary Taylor is not a fan of the plan, and so essentially that kills the plan right there. If the president doesn't agree, once it gets sent to the president's desk, he'll veto it, get it out of here. That's been repealed. That'll not be a law, even if all of Congress wants it. Well, I guess not all of 2/3 of Congress. You get the gist. That's Clay's plan. Pretty interesting plan. A lot of moving parts. Doesn't go anywhere, though, because of the president. Next topic. Douglas's solution to the inability to solve the plan to come up with the compromise. So one really, really big thing is going to happen, and so our story's going like this way, going that way, and all of a sudden, boom, we're going to just make a big U-ey and turn this sucker back around because the president, Zachary Taylor, former General Zachary Taylor, he dies. He's dead as president. So you should know by now, 8th grade, when the President of the United States dies, what happens? Well, what happens is the Vice President becomes President. Who was his Vice President? This guy from New York named Millard Fillmore. And why does it matter? Traditionally you think Vice President is going to carry on the policy of the President. Squirrel's going crazy back there. Now the dog's going to go crazy. Sorry about that. You would think the Vice President is going to carry on the policies of the President. Brody Bros, come here. But Millard Fillmore agreed with Clay's plan. And he wants the Whigs to follow through. He wants Clay's plan to be put into place. And he's got a guy, a senator from Illinois, Stephen A. Douglas, who we will talk about later, who's going to be very important to America's story. He's from Illinois, a pioneer state. We haven't had much influence from Illinois. A lot of our influence comes from like places like Virginia, Massachusetts, states that were like original colonies. Now we got people from the pioneers like making influential decisions. Stephen A. Douglas says, listen, we will break Clay's plan into individual parts. So when Congress votes, they will vote for each part, not like the whole thing all together. And then President Fillmore, this is what I need you to do. I need you to get the Whigs to abstain, to not vote. So not necessarily vote no, but just don't vote in general. And if the Whigs don't vote, the Democrats will get this thing taken care of. And boom, Stephen Douglas, with the death of General President Zachary Taylor, who was once an American war hero general, when he dies, with new President Millard Fillmore, they are able to accomplish what Clay wanted, and the Compromise of 1850 is essentially made because of all this. So, usually you hear compromise, you think, oh, they're going to shake hands, you lost a little, I lost a little, but ultimately we kind of got the most important things we want, and we're going to move forward together. And that's what we'd like to think the Compromise of 1850 is going to do, but it doesn't. So, let's transition now to our next topic, and our next topic is essentially like a reflection of how the compromise isn't really a compromise, how it's just going to lead to more and more tension between the two parties, now the North and the South. I want to focus specifically on the Fugitive Slave Act within the Compromise of 1850 to show you how the North reacted and allow that to just be a demonstration of the animosity and I don't want to say unwillingness. I don't like slavery, so I'm not ever going to criticize a member of the North for how they handle this, but basically they're not going to get along, they're not going to work together, and eventually we know they'll probably fight it out. So we have the Fugitive Slave Act. I think I briefly mentioned it earlier. You hold a slave, you help a slave, you free a slave, you can be charged with a crime and sent to jail. What happens in the North as a result of this? Well, they're starting to be like really anti-slavery in the North. So basically, they resist the law. They ignore it, and they commit actions that go against it. An example of Northern attitudes is you have a writer, Henry David Thoreau. He's a transcendentalist. We will talk about the transcendentalist movement a little bit later. It's like artsy American movement. He's going to essentially say something like this in response to the Fugitive Slave Act. He's going to say, like, if a law makes you violate another man's justice, well, then it's your right to break that law. And a lot of people in the North agree. Let's say an individual is being charged of assisting a runaway slave, and they're sitting there, at court. A lot of times Northern juries would find them not guilty, so nothing would happen on that end. And some individuals in the North started having this like underground communication as to how we can get slaves from the South and bring them up north to give them their freedom and do it all, secretly, because we're not allowed to do it. We violate the law. Hey, does that sound like anything you've ever heard before? If not, I'm going to tell you now, it's the birth of the Underground Railroad. So the Compromise of 1850, why is it so important? It's so important because even though it sounds like a compromise, it's not. It's kind of like the beginning of the end. And it really draws a hard line in the sand between those in the North, which are starting to be like outspoken against the practice of slavery, and those in the South who feel essentially like the federal government in America is turning their back on them because they believe in the concept of states' rights. They also believe there's an intertwined relationship between cash crop production in the South and manufacturing in the North. They kind of feel like the North just gets rich on the labor of the South, and therefore the North should be more understanding and empathetic to the forced labor system. A few other things are going to happen. Eventually we are going to go to war, but that's where our story will stop today. Compromise of 1850. Make sure you finish your notes. Make sure you write your summary. There's going to be an online assignment attached to this. It's the same as it always is. Be nice to the people you love. Be nice to your friends. Be physically active. Love you guys. Miss you guys. Peace.